Hello and welcome to Middlebury 5-0. I am your host, Officer Chris Mason, and with me in the studio today is Nick Artim. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Well, thank you, Officer Mason. It's good to be here. I had heard this was a rather luxurious studio, but it's really much nicer than I ever thought. So, fantastic place. You
It
do
exceeds your expectations.
It exceeds my expectations. I'm impressed.
The structural duct tape. And
it's designer duct tape. It's very, very nice.
Absolutely.
You are an important person in town.
So the town election is coming up.
It is.
And you are currently a member of the select board.
That's correct.
And your seat is up for re-election.
It is.
Correct?
It is.
So you are the incumbent.
I am the incumbent,
Yeah.
yes. This will be, it's hard to believe, it's 3 years already that's gone by. Well, actually, 6 years has gone by. And
Right.
think of all the things that are going on in town, I guess it's gone by fast. But
6 glorious, fun-packed years.
6 glorious, fun-packed years. It's been an incredible opportunity, incredible ride, and a lot of good things happening in town, a lot of good things in the future to come. So it's good to be a part of it.
Well, tell me how you came to be on the select board. Like, what motivated you originally, all those years ago?
Well,
6 years was about the same time that I was coming up to Vermont from Virginia.
Okay.
So right around that time, you were joining the select board.
I was. Yeah. What had happened is I had been on public safety for several years. I mean, my background as an engineer and dealing in emergency services, that was an area that I was on. I had considered being on the board. Didn't do it because children, our family, the children were young, and my job puts me on the road a fair bit, so the time wasn't there. About 6 years ago, our son was done. He was out of the house. Our daughter was getting ready to go out, and so the opportunity was starting to emerge. And there was a vacancy that came about. Bill Perkins, who was a longtime outstanding member of the board, was stepping down to move out west.
Okay.
And this was October 2009, if I recall. And Dean George, who's my next door neighbor, came over and said that there is a vacancy. He said, I knew I considered running at some point in the future, and said, why don't you come on, we'll come interview, and if we like you, you'll get appointed to fill out Bill's term through March. And then if you do like it, you can run again. And so that's how I actually ended up getting on it in the first place, was through appointment.
Right. Well, that's nice, because you get to test it out, take it on a little test run before you make the decision whether you're going to run or not.
Well, it was a test run. Where you find out there's so much to learn is by the time I realized some of the things I was learning, next thing I knew, it was time to up for the election. And
sure.
It's been a constant test run, really, in many respects. So yes,
perpetual learning experience.
Perpetual learning experience,
Right.
Very much so, very much so.
Well, now Dean George is stepping down, so the board is facing a pretty significant transition in that respect.
Well, it is. It is. Dean, he's been on it for 20 years, which I think is just both amazing, admirable, and I'm not sure how one can stay the enthusiasm for 20 years, but Dean has, and he's a tremendous leader. Plus, he's been my next door neighbor for 21, 22 years, and so he's also a good friend. So it's both a professionally being on the board, I'm sorry to see him go, but I know why. And then on a personal friendship level, I'm sorry to see him go, but I understand why. And so, yes, it is, we'll have a transition coming up in leadership.
Right.
And, but we'll go on and we'll do fine. And we're not going to let Dean go away. There's things that we're going to keep him on. And so he's not getting away that easy. We know where he lives.
That's right, exactly.
So anyway, but yes, there'll be a transition coming up.
Right.
So we'll see where we go.
So you mentioned that you have a background in engineering.
I do.
I know there are lots of types of engineering. What kind of engineer are you?
I'm actually, by training, a fire protection engineer.
Okay.
And so I work with cultural heritage properties, museums, libraries, things like that through the world. What's happened, though, in recent years is because of the specialty of buildings I work with, I've been doing a lot more security engineering, and which is really security and fire. They're all part of emergency management. And with the properties I'm dealing with, it's how do we deal with an array of emergency situations that can develop. And you find there's a lot of consistency in the protocols.
Right.
From different emergencies that you try to standardize. And then we're actually trying to use some of that knowledge and expertise to improve our whole emergency service delivery here in Middlebury. I mean, one of the things that often is not thought of when we talk about public safety, is obviously police is well known and fire is well known, but it's also the whole emergency management aspect of how will we as a town handle whether it's a severe storm or flooding incident or transportation emergency, all things that all of you on first line see, but I think a lot of times people aren't aware that it's a big picture.
Sure.
And so, and then part of it, from our perspective on the board, is how do we make sure that our public inventory of buildings and facilities is ready to deal with that. You know, we'll maintain integrity and can respond accordingly.
Right.
So.
Yeah, because you don't want to be figuring those things out in the midst of the emergency,
that's
as is so often the case.
Well, that's true. I mean, there's enough that you're trying to figure out already.
Yeah.
So we want to have a good basis of information that all of you who are first responders don't have to worry about.
Sure.
Such as the vehicles will start, or the communication links will work, or any of those things. You know, the operations center will be around so that you can deal with what you are faced with, and you have to change and think about it on a dynamic basis, on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, those incidents are just so logistically complex, different agencies involved, and you know, everybody using different language and having a different approach and different priorities. It can be very challenging coordinating that.
Well, it can be, and it can be, and you're having to deal with, as you say, a number of agencies and a number of corporations. So, you know, for example, a vehicular incident that maybe involves a fuel spill or a hazardous waste spill, obviously you're dealing with the immediate issues, you and the fire department, but then there's, you know, there's state and there's federal agencies that you can pull resources from. It may involve the transportation company, it can involve the state highway department, it can involve the power company, and so it's a big picture item.
Right.
And then also just having standardization so that we can provide assistance to a neighboring area as well as they could come to us if we need to. So it's big, and it's an important part of what we do in this town.
Sure. You know, people like to imagine that things aren't going to happen in sleepy little Middlebury, but things come up. You know.
Well, they do.
Yeah.
They do. Yeah. I mean, we're not isolated. And certainly, I mean, the case of the derailment a few years ago in town, it showed that that's an incident that can happen anywhere. It was well handled, but that was the success. I mean, I think too often it was focused on was we had a derailment, we had this emergency, and if one stops their thought process there, that's all they see. But in fact, what they often don't recognize is that our forces did a really good job of handling that, and it was a really good effort with police and fire and emergency management and even the railroad and everybody else, so that it didn't become a bad thing.
Yeah.
So
you say like heritage sites. That sounds pretty glamorous. It's places that have some history associated with them.
They do.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not quite sure how this kid from northern New York, from a blue-collar family, got into this, but it's sometimes just luck. But I've been fortunate. I work with some really wonderful organizations. National Park Service is my biggest client.
Wow.
So I work in national park sites throughout the country. I've worked with several presidential homes. I'm working on George Washington's home right now.
Oh, wow.
So it's, and I sit there and look at it and think, I'm not sure how this ride happened, but I've been pretty fortunate. But I've learned a lot from these people. I mean, it's to be a part of what they know is really just, it's intriguing. And I like to think sometimes it helps me in my own thought process for being on the board.
Right.
I mean, I look at it from the perspective of my board role, and many times is from an engineer's viewpoint, taking collectively the knowledge I've been able to gain from the people I work for.
Sure. And you've done a lot of international travel as well.
I have, yes. I have.
Abroad.
I have. I've done a lot of work in the UK, Ireland, Scotland. I actually do work in Sweden right now, so I'm over there a couple times a year.
Wow.
Did have the opportunity to go to Russia once, which was really fascinating.
You weren't working on the Kremlin, though.
No, no, I wasn't working on the Kremlin. I walked around outside and realized that it was because it was at that transitional period. It was not long after the cease of the Cold War.
Right, Glasnost
was there, and I'm walking around and you know, having conversations with these Russians on Red Square and realizing that a short time earlier I would have been arrested for being there.
Yep.
But in fact, what I found was the Russians were just incredibly warm, hospitable people.
Must have been an incredibly exciting time.
It was a tremendous time, and the Russians are just, they really are great people. In many respects, they have a lot of similarity to Americans. They have that same kind of quirky humor that Americans can have, and sort of the satire. And I found a strong similarity with the Russians and Americans. So we had great conversations, and I made a lot of friends in a short time.
So that's fabulous.
Again, one of those great opportunities. So,
was there anywhere that you went to that really just blew you away, where you felt like completely at home? Like this?
Actually, yes, Gothenburg, Sweden. And the reason why is because my ancestry on my mother's side came from the region.
Right.
And the first time going there, arriving into the airport arrivals hall, waiting for my suitcase and looking around, and I thought, looks like a family reunion. And so it was a fascinating experience. It was an odd sensation of, well, maybe I've come home.
Right.
So
a homecoming.
A homecoming.
Yeah, wonderful.
And then the Swedes are so nice. They come up to me and they start speaking in Swedish, and my Swedish isn't that good. And then they apologize for speaking Swedish in their own country, and it's like, no, it's okay. So and I've made good friends over there too. So yeah, so that would be one of the places. But you know, the truth is, Chris, all the places I go, there's still nothing finer than seeing the Champlain Valley and Middlebury on that final approach coming in.
Yeah, and this is a very special place.
It is a very special place, and as many times as I've come into this airport, it's never gets old.
I've done a lot of traveling myself. I've seen a lot of places around the world. Maybe not quite as many as you, but been to a lot of different countries and seen a lot of beauty. A lot of natural beauty and a lot of beautiful cities as well. But there's something special about coming back to this place.
There is, and it's also the people you meet. You know, sometimes I hear some of the rhetoric that goes on, and there's this negative attitude for people from a country or a land or a view, and it's like, you know, when you get there and you actually meet them and you spend time with them on a one-on-one basis, you find we're not all that different.
Right.
You know, we sort of have the same things that we value. You know, we want safety for ourselves and our family and our friends. You know, we want a roof over our head, and we want food and clean water and clothing, and we want our children to have a chance. And you know, it's pretty consistent. And I've made a lot of great friends through the years doing that.
Right. Yeah, I find a lot of those attitudes hold for when you think of people in the abstract. When you actually meet people, when you interact with people, when you go to these places, you spend time with them. It's amazing how much of a connection there is.
It really is. It really
Even
is.
coming from radically different cultures, maybe having different religions, different backgrounds and experiences, there's a core kind of human experience that you connect with immediately.
There is, and even if you speak a different language. I mean, I think of Russia was a fascinating time because, I mean, I don't speak any Russian. They spoke some English. I speak a little French. They speak some French. I was with a Canadian museum group, and some of the people spoke German. They spoke some German. We would sit around and have these conversations that was 4 or 5 different languages. We would laugh hysterically. I have no idea half of what they said, but I loved the time.
Right.
And it was. And at the end of the week, when we were getting ready to leave, I mean, there's hugs and kisses, and it's like you're old friends, and you hated to leave.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was. We managed to communicate. We managed to find common ground. Yes, we had disagreements on certain things. We had things we agreed with. But at the end of the day, we had great dialogue, and we had respect for each other, and we built this friendship.
Right.
And there's so much of that lesson just valuable for certainly what you do and what we do on the board.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, I mean, having an engineering background in itself would be something that is tremendously valuable for the select board. There are a lot of issues that come into the town where that insight, that expertise, I'm sure, is very valuable. But having that breadth of vision as well, that perspective from having traveled to so many different places and seen so much and interacted with so many different people, I would imagine that would be just as critical.
I like to think so. As far as the engineering on it, I suppose it depends on who you ask. Some may say it's a valuable asset. Some are like, oh, here's the engineer again. But it is. I mean, you know, the thing is, we have 7 people on the board, and everybody has a different experience and different skill sets, and it makes it really quite useful. You know, I think, well, Dean, certainly he had his experience in law enforcement, and there's a real fascination to how he can approach things. You know, Gary Baker, he's a longtime resident, and he really has a deep knowledge of the town. you know, Brian Carpenter is, you know, is a fascinating individual, both from a business and a military perspective. And
Brigadier General.
Brigadier General, I know it. And I've watched him. Sometimes the general has spoken.
Right.
But, you know, and you know, and Susan and Laura, they have great things they bring in their you know, experiences. And so, and Dawn, of course, with the bank, she's been fantastic.
Right.
But I think the engineer's perspective, what it does for me is I often put things into the sort of the logical engineer's approach. That when there's an issue before us, the first thing I want to do is understand the issue. You know, what's the problem?
Yep.
And what's often hard, but has to be done, is to really try to understand as many sides of the issue as possible. I mean, I know that you probably experience this in your job. In fact, I know you do, is sometimes you approach an emergency scene and there's you know, somebody is speaking loud and trying to direct your attention, and if you get drawn too much into that, you may not see the other side of the story.
Right.
And the truth is somewhere in between. I mean, we have sometimes issues that people feel very passionate about, and they you know, they do their democratic right. You know, they come to meetings, they stand in front of microphones, they write letters to the editor, and they show a side of the story. But what's important is to know, okay, what's the other side of the story?
Right.
And often that comes to me from the people in the diner, who come to me in the car garage, who stop me on the street. Right. And so I get that. So it's a matter of understanding what is the issue, what, you know, what are we trying to achieve, and make sure that's clearly understood. And then look at options, because there's always options. One of the things in the engineering world is you can't just say, okay, here's the solution, or here's the problem, or the solution, what's your problem? You know, you have to make sure that you look at the various solutions. And for each solution, you will get positive things and you will get negative. Very rarely do you have the perfect answer. So as a board member, we have to say, okay, given the choices, which is the one that's going to serve the town of Middlebury best? And then to proceed with it. And so it follows that whole logic approach that an engineer is kind of trained in, that we do. And through the years professionally, I've had times when I haven't done all those details well. And it's come back later in a way that I wish I had thought about better.
Right.
So sometimes when we have issues presented before us, I'm often reluctant to start to speak with an answer, because I don't know what that is. I want to make sure that I really think about that carefully, and get that. But I like to think that certainly from my approach, it's served me well, and hopefully it serves the people of Middlebury well in that approach.
Yeah, as a public servant, I can definitely relate to that. You know, there are definitely times when I haven't listened, I haven't assessed the situation as evenly as I might, I haven't done all the work, I've rushed to get to a solution a little too rapidly, and it seems expedient at the time, but you never you never land up saving time taking that approach, and people get hurt, and you know it's much better if you can actually remain patient and work through it, be a little methodical about it sometimes, but take in those different perspectives and weigh those different attitudes and ideas.
Right. Well, and I think in the case there of what you experienced on the street, I actually had worked as a professional firefighter during my university days. It was actually, I was able to put myself through school, so I saw that side of it.
Right.
But even on the board, I think as humans, we want to solve things. We want to make things good. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes the mistake can be if we rush to make it good.
Right.
We may not make it as good as it should be. And so we have to just be a little more methodical, take time. Sometimes it's just hard, as you know, just to take time and get it right, but it's the way we do it best.
Yeah.
Especially in things, many of the decisions we're doing, I mean, you're dealing with things on a daily basis that need action quicker.
Right.
Many of the things we do on a board, it's not life-threatening. So we do have time to get it right and to really think about it, and we should.
Well, a lot of the things are things that are going to remain a part of this community for, I mean, years, if not generations. Some of the things, some of the decisions that are being made, especially with respect to infrastructure and such.
Well, very much so.
Yeah.
And then the thing that I find I've been thinking about more in this last term especially, and I think it's because now I have children who are adults and they're in the workforce or in higher education, and you know, and have many they grew up with a lot of other children in the community, and so we see them. They've all gone off. They've gained skill sets. They want to live here. Many of them do.
Right.
And so how do we make this town not only suitable for us now, but then for this next generation?
Right.
And sometimes what the next generation wants isn't necessarily what we always want, but nonetheless, it's important that we find that balance, especially since we're going to be handing this town to them in a not too distant future.
Right. Yep.
Think about it, and it'll be good for us. So a lot of effort is toward not only present but future.
So there's been a lot of upheaval in the town of late. We had the new town offices being constructed, the new town gym. That was a very complex and occasionally it was a little bit divisive as well. That process. There was a lot of passion that went into that. What are the things that are on the horizon? What are we looking at, kind of moving forward with Middlebury?
Well, there's probably a number of things. The thing that's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge for us over the next couple of years is this downtown bridge project.
Right.
It's going to be a painful project. In many respects, it's sort of symptomatic of what we as a country have failed to do, and that's to take care of our infrastructure.
Right.
So, I mean, my bigger question is, why do these bridges ever get this bad? But given the fact that that's a question that the answer is now relatively irrelevant, we have to solve it. And so it's a matter of how do we make this happen quickly and efficiently. And I think we're making progress on that. When the project, the last 6 months or so it emerged, was going to take a 4-year project to get done.
Right.
We're now seeing that timeline whittled down.
Sure.
And we're putting a lot of emphasis toward how quick can we get this built so we can get the pain out of the way as quick as possible.
So just trying to condense it.
Trying.
Like a concentrated burst.
Concentrated bursts. I mean, I look at the Champlain Bridge and how that was built relatively quickly, working straight through the year. I think as a community that would do us best.
Right.
And I believe the community would certainly much rather have that than something stretched out over 3 or 4 years. Right. At the end, it would be a very nice project when it's done.
Yeah.
Other things that are coming along, some new development projects. The EDI, what's been referred to as EDI site here, it's behind Ilsley, is one that's coming along. That went through that's been talked of for a number of years in how to turn what is a valuable piece of land into a useful piece that will be good for the town.
Yep.
We went through a fairly exhaustive search to try to find developers who would be interested in that project. And while we have this vision of it's a wonderful town and developers would love to be here, that's not the reality. I mean, it is a wonderful town, but developers see a lot of wonderful towns, and they're going to places many times where they can make more money.
Right.
We have this group that's a local group has emerged and has a really good love of the town. They want to be a part of this. And so we're in the process of putting together a development agreement so that when the bridge project is done, hopefully this can proceed into something as a multi-use project that will include a lot of, the way it's looking right now is it will be a lot of good mid-level housing, apartments, which is pretty important for employers who are trying to get professional help. Right. You know, we know there's a shortage in those nice apartments in here. I've had some employers say that they've had employees who are young engineers, young scientists, young technical help who are very good, but the housing they want is in South Burlington, so they commute back and forth, and after a year they just relocate, and so we lose, our employers lose out, and so does the chance to have these people. So there will be those projects happening. Continued growth in the industrial park. We have an economic development officer, which has been hired during my tenure. I'm really proud to have Jamie on board. He's been really actively, aggressively looking at ways to strengthen our industrial base. Right. With specialty companies that really fit with the Vermont ideal, do high quality, provide good paying jobs for everyone. You know, so the people who have the solid work ethic, who have lived here for years, and all of a sudden their company moves and they're without a job, we want to make sure they have a place that they can work close by, as well as I say, our kids or somebody who comes and adds something to the community. They move here and they want to be a part of it. For sure. So that's happening, and We're looking at, in not too distant future, after the bridge job's done, we understand Amtrak rail service is coming.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to have passenger train service coming into town. That's going to be nice. And just a lot going on.
Have we ever had Amtrak come through?
We've never had Amtrak. We've never had Amtrak. I don't recall the year that it was then the Rutland Railway stopped service.
Yeah.
I've heard the year, and I want to say it was in the 1950s.
Right.
But I don't know that recall that exactly. But it's been a number of years.
It's been a while. Yeah.
It has been a while.
Yep. I know there's a derelict platform that's down on McIntyre Road.
Right.
I don't know if that was part of when we had passenger service, or if that is after that period. But
I don't recall. I don't know the exact story on that. However, we do have a wonderful project going on by a number of the classes up at Middlebury College, where they're actually studying what a multimodal station would be like. And so it's not just passenger train, but it's also actor. It would also serve intercity buses.
Right.
You know, there's a bus, for example, that now it runs again between Albany and Burlington, and serves that. There's the commuter buses to Rutland and to Burlington. And so that they're looking at that.
Sure.
And then they're also looking at passenger loads so that the rail corporation knows what they could expect. And it's a fascinating opportunity. And being with the students and their creativity is wonderful.
Yeah, I love that Middlebury College. I've heard of many projects that they do, like out in the community and beyond as well, and the wider community. And it seems like there's a lot of engagement at the college with students.
Well, there is. And a classic case was the fire stations. You know, during the last 6 years, we rebuilt one fire station and built a new one on the existing site. And that had been discussed for quite a long time. And you know, certainly the firefighters who respond, they had a pretty good idea of where fire stations should be.
Right.
But we felt it was best to try to quantify that. So that if we as a town were going to spend several $1 million in upgrading these emergency facilities, we want to make sure we did it right and put them so they would last for a long time. And so there was a geography class, created models, and they actually did response analysis for us. They studied available sites. They did a fantastic project. And at the end of the day, what came out of it is that the fire stations were where they're supposed to be.
That's great.
And really validated what the firefighters knew.
That's wonderful.
But it was able to say, okay, this makes sense. Now we can spend the money. We can get the stations proper. They're on the right location. And we're not wasting the taxpayers' money. So that was just one of the many things they do. And certainly with the new, I mean, Ron Leibowitz was a fantastic president of the college. He was just so engaged in the community and wanted to be a part. And certainly what we are seeing with the new president, she's fantastic as well. And I see it all across the faculty.
Right.
And the students really get something out of it. And they, it's nice too because it's not you know, the students and the townies. I remember when I went to college, there was the townies and there was the students. But in fact, what we have is that doesn't exist. It breaks that wall down. And so they're part of us and we're part of them. And it really makes a wonderful synergy.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Nick. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. It's just, I feel like we could just continue.
Well, we could. Do we just keep going?
Yeah. Such a pleasure, such a delight.
Well, thank you, and certainly I appreciate what all of you do out there. It's not an easy job, and we're very fortunate in this town to have just great cross spectrum from our town manager to everyone who's on the street.
Yeah, great people.
We really are. We're very proud of them.
So we have the town elections coming up on March 1st.
March 1st, yes.
Right? And you will be running for select board.
I will be running for select board.
Well,
and so on the end of March 1st, I'm either back or I'm doing something else. We'll see what happens.
Well, thank you so much for your service and your dedication. It's a big investment.
Please do it.
Yep.
Please do it.
Well, thanks again, Nick.
You bet, Chris. Thanks for everything.
So until next time, drive safe and may all your mischief be of the lawful persuasion.